let's talk about the career a little bit here.
Mhm.
So for our listeners, growing and scaling is a huge focal point. Everyone's looking to grow a portfolio or grow their business. For our listeners who don't know, you got involved with the city while you're still in law school,
Mhm.
unpaid intern, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
So talk us through, how did you move up the ranks, right? You had so many accomplishments, which we'll get to in a second, but how did you go from unpaid intern to running the department?
Yeah. So I was in law school, and I'm not the most academic of people. I'm more of a doer. I'm more of a practical person, problem solver. And I knew that when I was in law school that all the theory and all that we were learning was great. But if I didn't learn the process of actually how things worked, I wouldn't be as successful. So I wanted to also get school credit for working because I worked full time when I went to law school. So I've never been afraid of work. I always worked two jobs ever since I was 16 years old, or 15 actually. And so I was eager to expand and do more. So we had a counselor, Professor Vivian Gross, and I went to see her and I said, I want to do an unpaid externship for class credit. So she went through a list. She said the CTA. I said no. CHA. She said no. I said no. And then she said, well, we have the city of Chicago here and they do housing court in the law department. Would you like to do that? And I said, yes, that's what I want. And to this day, I couldn't tell you why I picked it. I don't know. I naturally did well in my property classes in law school. I think it kind of came naturally to me and it sounded good. And so I went to the city and I started an unpaid externship. And then they offered me a job as a paid intern, I should say. I think I made I think at the time, I don't even know what they were paying. Maybe it was $7 an hour, something crazy. But I was a student and a law student. I had a full-time job. And so I worked 5 days a week at my other job. And then I worked 2 days a week at the City of Chicago Law Department, where I got paid my $7 an hour. And so there I think I started in demolition court. Then I went over to help in another courtroom where we had a lot of downtown buildings. And we had some of the West Side. And then I also started doing working in court for lead paint violations, housing that had lead paint. And so I was a 7-Eleven law clerk, which meant that I was able to prosecute cases while I was still in law school and get up in front of the bench. And I was really fortunate because the first judge that I practiced a lot in front of is Paul Preston. He's passed away many years ago, but he kind of looked like Grandpa from the Munsters. He would sit up behind the bench and he taught me so much of what I do to this day. And the big thing that he taught me was to really listen and to let people talk, So we would have a lot of defendants building owners, small building owners, often very small, not the slumlords that you often think of, but sometimes we had them, but, and they would come in and he would always give a speech about how we're here to preserve buildings. And he gave a big opening speech and then he let people speak and he really listened to them. And sometimes they would go on and basically admit their violations. And he'd say, by your own admission, and then he'd order them to fix it. But he was very beloved. If he was on the bus or out on the street, he would see defendants, building owners, they'd come up to him. Hi, Judge, how are you? They just loved that he took the time and really listened. And that was a huge, huge lesson that I learned from him. And he was kind and he listened and he was practical. And so that was a great experience for me as a law student. And I also had a couple mentors in the law department too that taught me how to listen and to solve problems and to work things out. So then eventually after I finished law school, I was hired, as an attorney in housing court. And so I continued on and I worked. As I started, after I was a lawyer, I got married and I was still continuing to prosecute in housing court, doing my job. And then I had my first child and I really wanted to get out of work on time and get home, to my daughter. And so I said, I'm going to be the best employee that I can be. Whatever my boss asks me to do, I'm going to do it first, right? Because I don't want to get stuck after work. I don't want to have issues. I want to be able to leave on time. And if I do everything really well, no one's going to give me a hard time. And it worked. It was great. I did all my work. I worked through lunch. Whatever people asked me to do, I did. And so, that combination. And so I just continued to work while I started my family. After my second daughter was born, I got promoted to be a senior counsel to supervise some of the other attorneys. And I was leery about doing that because I had two small children at home. But, my boss said, it'll empower you more because you'll have more people to help you. You could supervise. It's going to work out. Trust me, it'll work out. So my boss did that. And I thought that was great. And so I did that for many years. And over time, I just tried to help everybody that asked me for help, right? So if somebody, didn't have heat, I really worked hard to make sure they had heat. Or if there was a really dangerous vacant building next door to them and they were afraid, we would work towards getting that house down. If there was a bad landlord that wouldn't fix something, a lot of times fines don't work because they just go into this like Netherland. I don't know where they go, where somebody out there tries to enforce it. So one of the things I figured out how to do, and I did this with Judge Preston, I learned early, was to make people come back to court every single day until it was complied, because nobody wants to come back to the Daly Center every single day. And if they miss a court date, you can ask the judge to issue a warrant for their arrest. So they have to come, right? And so I tried to be more and more creative with my solutions. Also sometime in the 90s, we had a terrible situation of a woman and her two daughters that died of carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty heating system. And, with that, I thought, well, what are we going to do here? Because any fine, what's that going to help? And there was no insurance. And so we worked out an agreement for the owner to sell all his properties and settle up with the family. So I tried to find solutions that were more creative and that help people, because fines have a place, but they don't solve everything. You really have to really think creatively and outside the box. So anyway, time went on. And, I worked for the housing division, but we were also in our division, we also had zoning, we had demolition, we had the drug and gang house unit, we had licensing and so forth. And so the deputy of our department left, and I was made the acting deputy for a while. And then right before Mayor Emanuel became mayor under Mayor Daley, I was made the deputy of the division. And I did that for 5 or 6 years. And we did a lot of really great things during that time. We worked really hard on crime buildings and getting those under control, getting vacant properties under control. That was also during the time of, 2008, when we had the housing crash, having to deal with all that. So we came up with a lot of creative solutions for that, worked on the vacant building ordinance, worked on sign ordinances. And so at the beginning of Mayor Emanuel's second term, I was asked to interview for the job of building commissioner. And so then I was appointed in 2015 to become the building commissioner. And, I think the high points of that interview were not only, I talked to, Mayor Emanuel about our families and things that we had in common, but also I think that we understood that for economic development to happen, you have to be very welcoming of economic development. You have to work with developers. You have to move obstacles out of their way, right? And it's also very important, though, not to just help the developers, but you also have to help in the neighborhoods. You have to make sure that buildings are safe, that people have heat, that people have hot water, and that you're willing to enforce and to do what's necessary to keep people safe. That's a huge part of it as well, right? So it's not just development, it's many things. And so we came to a good place on all of that. And he gave me the opportunity to run this department, even though at the time, I think I might have supervised maybe 50 to 60 people. This came out to over almost 300. And he's like, can you do that? I'm like, yeah, sure, I can do it. Absolutely.